evolutionary spirituality is emerging out of what I call progressive spirituality. And progressive spirituality is a similar kind of category of different spiritual views: alternative, countercultural, New Age, Eastern translated to Western. The progressive spiritual culture that has emerged primarily in the developed world, beginning in the late 60s and early 70s and maturing over the last few decades, has been a beautiful thing in many ways, but it also has many silly parts and regrettable parts, and that's all somewhat to be expected. But evolutionary spirituality is distinct. It sort of pushes off against progressive spirituality, while at the same time trying to carry forward the best of progressive spirituality. And the way that it does that is that it's able to harmonize and integrate science and spirituality at a higher level than has been able to than progressive spirituality has been able to achieve. And if we think about science and spirituality, the bridge between these two is really philosophy. Philosophy acts to both separate science and spirituality so they don't try to colonize each other, but it also integrates them and brings them together. Philosophy is intellectual, and the best philosophy is somewhat intellectually rigorous, while ultimately, hopefully, still being useful and accessible to the average person. But philosophy is not something that you see much of within progressive spirituality for evolutionarily appropriate reasons. In other words, progressive spirituality has its own job in the course of cultural development. It's trying to push off against modernity, push off against science. And so dispensing with the sort of the hyper-rational thinking that goes with modernist philosophy and science is one of the ways that progressive spirituality was able to liberate the spiritual culture from those constraints. But now that we're standing on the shoulders of the accomplishments of progressive spirituality, we're able to bring back a level of philosophical rigor and intellectual integrity that it helps us make this transition. And the idea that while progressive spirituality is good in its own way, and the people who find meaning and value there certainly is commendable and acceptable, but for those of us who are dissatisfied with the spiritual leadership that progressive spirituality has been able to supply, the fact that it's not taken seriously by the mainstream society and it's still countercultural even after decades of development, I think this points to the need for a more inclusive and agreeable form of spiritual leadership that can create a larger sense of solidarity within the developed world and overcome scientism and mythic religion, while still, again, carrying forward the best of those elements.